they had international attendance as well. And it was not an oil and gas conference, it was across many industries. And I was reminded of that because in one of the sessions that I sat in, the lady on the side of me, her portfolio said Waterworks of Beverly Hills. I thought that was pretty cool to be in the company of just so many different industries. And as I was trying to decide which of the sessions to go to, there were a number of sessions. And there was this one session that talked about a great place to work. And I didn't quite know what that meant, but I wanted to attend the session. By the time I got there, the meeting room was probably twice this size. All the seats were taken. There was no standing room even in the session. So people were lined up in the hall, along the walls in the meeting room, and they began to gather in the hallway outside of the meeting room. So I took my place on the floor, like everyone else did. So it was an hour session. Sat on the floor outside of the meeting room and listened to what they were saying in this session. And when they began to talk about, one of the first speakers was a representative from CarMax. And I remember they started talking about and making connections with how creating a great place to work for employees would impact the business results in a positive way. And that was really the first time I had heard those kind of thoughts, where you don't just focus on the financial results first, but you focus on employees, how to create a great place for employees. So I became intrigued in what they were talking about. And what really got my attention was a coal mining company. And what they began to do is they began to use language that was familiar to me with respect to things. They started talking about a blue collar workforce. They started talking about people out in the field. And I had a moment where I thought, well, if they can do it, surely we're better than they are, and we can do it at Danos. So what if? That was my first moment that I thought about, what if? What if for Danos, we were able to take some of these concepts that I was hearing there and truly focus on our employees to create a great place to work that would in turn produce positive business results for the organization. It just was a win-win concept in my mind. And so I went to a few more sessions similar to that in nature. One of them was an executive vice president for Chick-fil-A. And she didn't talk about how great their chicken was. That's not what she was saying, the differentiator for them. But what she was talking about was how important their culture is to the success of the organization. So when you go to Chick-fil-A and you say thank you, what do they tell you in response?
My pleasure.
Right? It's just what they do. And she talked about how in an industry, the fast food industry, that has a very high turnover rate, how their turnover by comparison was lower. And she attributed this, again, not to the great chicken that they serve, but to the culture that they have. So I really came back to the organization just pumped about what I was hearing. And I remember calling my boss at the time, Tommy Robichaud. I'm like, it's not about the chicken, it's about the people. So that was really what I came back, just excited about that and what that could mean for Danos. So I left with what if in my mind. What if we can do these things and create a place that would be great for people to work? So when we do this presentation, the next slide is a big old picture of me. And, we've shared this externally. So part of this, the purpose of this slide is to share some insight into what makes me a credible speaker on this topic. So I hold 2 senior level professional certifications in human resources. And I've been doing human resources in the oil and gas industry for 30 years. Yes, 30. And I've been at Danos for 20 years. And my entry point was HR assistant. Began working on tactical things for a number of years, and also doing some strategic things today. So this is a little bit about me and how I'm able to speak about this. So the next slide, we can kind of quickly go through these, but I'll be showing this presentation again to a Bayou Sherm group, which is a local human resources group. So we like to share a little bit about Danos. So just a little bit about, the organization started in 1947, and there are some indication there in the service lines that we have. And it also shows you an illustration of where we do business, the different areas in which we do business. And there's also indication of the number of employees that we have, also the man hours that we had in 2019, and an indication of the TRIR. So today what we'll do as I bring you through this journey, as we reflected over the last 10 years, for me it began to be bucketed into three different areas. So what we've been able to identify first off is how being intentional about company culture can truly transform an overall business. So that's one point, and I'll bring you through the journey that we had and how we came to discover that. The next part is how leading with foundational principles can truly inspire innovative ways of working, and we have some examples of how we accomplish that. And then the last part, all of these are so equally important, how aligning stakeholders can truly impact our outcomes and results. So the extent to which we can do all of these well is really how all of this came to be. But I do feel like before we start, a lot of times when you start talking about culture, it's sort of like a touchy-feely thing, right? And people, I remember hearing when we first started talking about this, people outside of the HR group would say, well, you know, Stacey, if you had some of your people here, it would be much easier to talk about because we don't really know how to talk about these things. So what I want to do is pause for a moment and talk about the measures of success that we've experienced as an organization from the time that we began this transformational journey. So these are some of our numbers. So what we did, we actually increased our acquisitions. So my starting point is about 2008, right? And then over the next 10-year period, we had a 100% increase in acquisitions. Our headcount increased by 245% as compared to 2008. We had a 400% increase in the services that we offer to customers. One thing that's especially interesting to me is the 900% increase in customers. This means that in 2008, we had 3 customers that made up 90% of our revenue. Today, we have 30 customers that make up 90% of revenue. So think about where we were 10 years ago and the downturn that we experienced as an industry, how vulnerable we would have been had we still maintained those 3 customers, right? That's a game changer. So this is something that we attribute as a measure of success. And then we've also had a 1,900% increase in transitions. So what that means, transitions happen primarily in our production services business. And this is where either an existing customer or a prospective customer is not pleased with their current partner that they have in place. So they seek out Danos to help them with a workforce. So we will transition, we've transitioned as few as a handful of employees, upwards to over 150 employees that we've transitioned. And depending on the complexity of the transition, then this can happen over the period of, you know, just a week, a couple of weeks, all the way up to 90 days. And it also happens depending on where the crew changes are taking place. I remember back in the day when we did BP, we were all, we had a headquarters at the BHP, not BHP, we had it at the PHI heliport, and we just had a command center. We received everyone when they came in off the crew change. So, and then in some cases we have where the crew changes happen all the way from Fushon to Galveston. So we have to deploy people, because we really want, when you think about Danos, we're different. We want to be different. We want to be able to look that potential employee in the eye and say, you know, we're here to support you. This is why we want you to be a part of our team. But sometimes these employees have a choice. So at any rate, we had that 1,900% increase in transition. The next measure of success that's equally impressive is if you look at the black block, this is the price of oil relative to our revenue. So the blue bars, that represents the Danos revenue. So look at what was happening at the start of this in 2008. We were enjoying a pretty healthy price in the oil, right? So we were about at $100 for a barrel of oil. And we all know, we're painfully aware of what happened in 2015 when you see that dramatic drop. But look at what's happening to the Danos revenue over that same time frame. So it's pretty impressive. Now, this does not mean, and if you were here, you know it, it was a difficult time, right? There were difficult decisions to make, and it was not an easy time. But what I would say, during that time, not only were we able to survive as an organization, because a lot of our peers were just surviving. We were able to thrive as an organization over that same time period. But again, there were some difficult decisions to make, but we believe that's a measure of success that we attribute in part to what we were doing. So again, it's important to establish some credibility when you're talking about what we're doing and how this is connected to some of the things that we've been able to have happen. So for the next slide, this is really just a great image of the history of Danos. And I really like this because it represents how the organization started from very humble beginnings, and it just takes you through a journey. So what I'll do in the next several slides is take you through that 10-year journey and the things that we've made some connection points, what's happened in our history. And what I would tell you is that, well, I would like to say that we created this very descriptive master plan about how this culture would be shaped over time. It didn't happen. Not at all. And it wasn't even a straight line, right? It wasn't a linear path to this. We just began to have some conversations. So I came back from the National Insurance Conference really excited about what was going on there and what application I thought it could have at Danos. The third generation owners were entering the business and trying to establish what was important to them, establish a purpose for why the organization existed and why they wanted to be a part of the organization that was deeper than creating shareholder value. They wanted to create something that would resonate with everyone to be a part of the organization. All of those things, those conversations began happening at the same time. What I'll tell you, the first thing we recognize is that how important it is to be intentional about company culture. So if we're going to go down this road and we're going to take that exit, we have to be intentional about it. And, you know, some people say, well, that culture thing is not for me. And every company has a culture. Regardless of if we can choose to be intentional about managing the culture or leading the culture in a way that supports our overall business goals and objectives, or we can just leave it to chance. Because a culture is nothing more than how we make decisions individually to execute our work, how we work together as a team to get things accomplished, to either produce our goods and services, and how we serve our customers as an organization. So that's what culture is about. And we at Danos, over time, made a conscious decision that we wanted to be intentional about leading the culture, not managing, because managing implies that you're kind of holding people, holding people to it, but we want to lead the way so that people will be willing to follow. So that was the first decision point about culture. And remember when I said it wasn't this grand master plan that was very prescriptive about how all of this would work out. We began talking about things like values. My entry point in '99, the company had values, but we really didn't talk about them in a significant way, not in the way that we're talking about them today. We also had a mission statement. I don't really remember what the mission statement was. There was a mission statement. There was strategic planning. People would go off and not exactly sure, there were a lot of good things happening, but it wasn't all coming together, right? So this is basically how we were talking about all of those things. But we began to shape in our minds over time how all of these things, the pieces and parts, should come together. And began to look like this. So we began to think about purpose in the way of this is why the company exists. This is why we're even, right? So very foundational to everything is the company purpose. The next thing are the values. If you think about the decisions that we make day in and day out, we need to be guided by our values. That's how we make our decisions. The next part is the vision. So the vision means where are we going? If we don't ever have some place that we want to get to, then if we're all busy with our heads down, will we land where we thought we were going? Instead of just leaving it to chance, talking about the vision. Culture became a very important topic for us, and also strategy. So all of these things need to complement one another, not work contrary to each other. And the way that we've been able to pull it together in a unique way for Danos has really been impactful. So I'll start with company purpose, and we'll spend a good bit of time talking through some of these slides. And one thing I remember about purpose, I'll begin to tell you some stories now. And what happened, the owners created this purpose statement, and they created something that was very genuine and authentic to who they are. And they were challenged at the time by one of the board of directors and said, this is a very personal purpose statement. And should you not consider creating a purpose statement that would resonate with a broader group? Because they began sharing it with us as a leadership team, wanted to share it with the employees. So the board of directors was concerned that maybe this was a little too personal. And I remember some of you were in that meeting. We went to a leadership retreat, and Paul came out with draft purpose statements to replace the purpose statement that they had created. And he came in, they were like glossy prints, they were pretty fancy, and it didn't take very long, and they raised their hand and they said, you know, Paul, I just started at Danos, and this is really why I came to work here, because of the purpose statement that you all drafted. And then we talked a little bit more, and then someone else said, we've been talking to customers lately. This is why they choose to work for Danos, and this is why they continue to work for Danos. So Paul literally took the purpose statements he drafted, tore them up, crumpled them, and threw them in the corner. And so this is the purpose statement that the owners created. They invited us to be a part of, is this the purpose statement that we keep or not? And we rejected the notion of changing it. So this is the purpose statement that we have today. Do it there. The next part are the values. So again, I told you that when I started at Danos, we had values. We didn't talk about them a lot, but we had values. And at one point in this transformation, the values were restated. They weren't, the essence of what they originally were are still there, but we restated the values. And at one point, after one of those meetings, Hank came into my office and he said, and I was the HR manager at the time, and he said, your responsibility as the lead person in human resources is to hold us accountable to these values. So he challenged me and gave me an assignment, and he told me that that was my responsibility to hold us, the organization, accountable to those values. So when you think about the defining moments about what's impactful and what's important, for me, the 2007 conference that I went to was pretty impactful and just changed my way of thinking about things. When Hank came into my office, he gave me that responsibility. It was a message to me that the stakes were pretty high in his mind when you're talking about things like values at a company. So I thought that was a pretty cool thing, and I take my job seriously in that regard, although it's been an easy task. So the next part is the vision. I remember when we started talking about the vision to become the standard of operational excellence by which every company as our industry is measured. I started a whole bunch because it was new verbiage for us. And when you think about this vision statement, we sat around conference room tables talking about what's the right vision statement for Danos. And we wanted to do something bigger and better and bolder than everyone else because we need to. that's what our people deserve, right? So we have an expanded vision statement, but this means that we just need to continue to work hard every day on behalf of everyone to set the standard. So we're not satisfied with just being like everyone else. We want to set that standard. The next part of high performance culture traits. And if you would have told me that these high performance culture traits that we created back in the day in Conference Room B would still be here today, I would have never believed it. What we did is we sat, I think it was Conference Room B at the time, and we began to think about what is it about high performing organizations? What are the things that they do to help them to have the success that they have? We recognized, we started doing research, and we recognized that there's a set of behaviors by which everyone conducts themselves. So we sat around the room, we talked about what the high performance culture traits of Danos should be or could be. We talked also about how are people demonstrating those high performance culture traits. And again, we created these internally. I would have never imagined that they would have stuck in the way that they do and be such guiding principles for us today. So we're proud that it's made the impact in the organization that it has. But what I would tell you, if you were here at the time, you know that we had a very robust communication campaign going on when we did those. We did employee-hosted webinars where people spoke about them. When you think about how competitive we are as individuals and as an organization, we had competitions. I remember Eric gave away a Benelli shotgun at a field safety focus forum where a field employee, it was like, who can stand up and tell me the high performance culture traits? And I think it was Mr. Andrew Smith at the time. He popped out of his chair and he recited these. I think Paul was walking around with cash. So when you think about it, it was really a great time because we rallied around this as an organization, and we really had a concerted effort about making this a part of who we are as a Danos organization. And it went well beyond the walls of the Danos building, right? We were reaching out to the field employees and making this happen. And then the last part of our pyramid, if you will, are the strategies. So the strategies absolutely have to be connected to what we have going on with respect to the foundational principles. So this 2020 logo was shared with the managers yesterday, and we shared before in the town halls that 2020 is about focus, right? So you won't see anything dramatically new as compared to 2019. So these are the things that we will continue to work on and finish what we've started. So there'll be more communications about that, and your manager could certainly provide you more insight. This is, how the strategy fits into everything. So those are all the things about, being intentional about your company culture. So the next part is really how are we leading with foundational principles? What does this look like? So as an organization, how are we modeling these behaviors? How are we connecting all the dots for everyone and truly helping to lead us in the path of where all of these things, the pieces and parts, all work together to help to continue to move the company forward? And when you think about culture, this is no longer regarded at Danos as an HR initiative, right? So this is really a corporate initiative that we have, and we've moved beyond, in some respects, saying, HR, it's easier for you to talk about this. So there's a lot of talk across the organization about cultural things and foundational principles. This slide, when we have a little bit of insight into what I like about this one is, even though it's a dated slide and we've used it for a couple of years now, I really like how the purpose is in the middle of what we're doing with respect to technology. So when you think about growth and learning and solving big challenges, that's what our purpose statement is about. And we can truly become strategic in how we apply this and use this to move the company forward by focusing on our customers. What are those things that we're doing for our customers? And what are the things that we're doing for the internal supporting organization with respect to technology? So you've heard by now, there's a lot of a lot going on in this space where we're providing solutions for customers in what we're doing in technology with ICANN. And there'll be more information shared on ICANN at later Lunch and Learn, but also in the internal supporting organization. I was in a meeting this morning where we're doing a kickoff for the HCM, the Human Capital Management System. So a lot going on in this space where I think this slide is still relevant. So mentioned ICANN. There's a lot, it's a very hot topic today with DESI, the regulators offshore. How are operators proving that their workforce is competent? So this slide is an image of the different things that we've been able to put together in order to help solve those problems for customers. And it really fits in nicely with what we're doing with regard to the purpose statement. So we say we want to develop great people to solve big challenges for our customers. So this works really well and fits nicely into that statement. Another thing that's going on when we think about how we're leading, right? We want to be the leader, leading with our foundational principles. There's a lot of conversation as of late with our customers about diversity. And there's a recognition that there's opportunities for improvement in the oil and gas industry as a whole. And so they are seeking out Danos to sort of help navigate what that could look like. So we've begun having conversations. We've engaged with a consulting company, PwC, who will help us to determine what does that multi-year strategy look like? What's the common language that we will have to be able to talk about these things? So these are just a bunch of words that might represent some of what you're hearing in this space, but we'll be working to determine what that looks like. So when you think about Danos leading the effort, we will take this on and we will be a leader in helping to shape what this looks like. So more to come on that. And then the next thing when you think about leading with our foundational principles is, I guess, the development or the creation of the Danos Foundation. So some time back, there was a recognition that the part of our purpose statement that said we want to solve big challenges for our communities, there was opportunity to fill that space a little more in a more significant way. So a group of employees, and this was led primarily by Renee Piper, created the Danos Foundation. So there's 3 elements of the Danos Foundation. Danos Gives is a grant program for charitable organizations. Also, Danos Works is where employees can volunteer their time in support of those organizations. And then the last piece is Danos Cares, where we are able to help employees, our own employees, Danos employees, who are in need by the donations of some of their fellow employees. So this is truly a great example of how, had we created a roadmap or some grand master plan, we most likely in 2007 would not have envisioned something like the Danos Foundation. So it's just been really good to see how, just by embracing these things, being intentional about it, and having people be a part of it, what the end results. And then the last part, element, is aligning stakeholders. So if you think about all the things I've shared with you, how important it is to align stakeholders. You know, are we aligned on things like goals? Are we aligned on things like what does success look like? Are we aligned on progression? And when I say stakeholders, this can mean everyone within Danos. This means our community. This means our customers. All of the various stakeholders that we engage with. When you align stakeholders, these are some of the pretty cool end results. So one thing that happened when I was at Danos, when I first started, we had what we called the Quality Person of the Year Award. And that award, one of the primary measures were financial. You know, what are the financial results that a person produces in order to be considered for that award? And there were some references to values as well. But what happened is, when you think about the transformation that we went through in the organization, what we did was we looked at this award and we said, well, let's make it more about the company values. Let's make it about how's the person living the values, How is the person demonstrating the high performance culture traits? And how are they embodying the spirit of our company purpose? So when that criteria changed, this is the end result of that. So we have Mr. Roland Kraut, who was the 2018 Employee of the Year winner for field, and our own Miss Julie Plaisance, the receptionist. So if you think about the criteria I described to you, it really changed what this looks like in the organization. I like this slide because it demonstrates how when you're aligning stakeholders, some of the great things that can happen. It's just a collage of different things that we have. And the two things I'll highlight for you are our Field Leadership Forum. And I remember we began thinking about a Field Leadership Forum, the way that we thought about this. I remember we were at a Japanese restaurant just talking about what this looks like almost on a napkin and saying, you know, it would be great to gather field leaders and to have them come in. We spend a day with them and, you know, where we're sharing ideas. So that's really where it started, sort of on a napkin a little bit. And what happened was, as we surveyed employees and we asked them what they thought about the day, I was very surprised. Almost every single time they're saying, someone in the group is saying, or more than one, they're saying, can these be longer and can we have more? I would not have imagined that. So it really turned out to be a good day. It's as good as they make it, but we've taken lessons learned over the years and reapplied that. And we've done these a little bit off and on, and there's a concerted effort to begin to have these once again. So these are really have been a good thing. The other thing I wanted to highlight, that really it was a short-term project, but I feel like we lived so many of our foundational principles in that short-term project. It was Shell Harvey Response, where we worked with Shell Harvey Response. It was Hurricane Harvey in 2017. So they reached out to Danos and asked us if we would help them with home remediation for about 220 of their employees. So a team of Danos folks rallied and essentially went to Houston. I mean, people were driving vans over there. People were housed over there for, you know, it was a short time frame, but you're talking about a few weeks where people just kind of packed up and moved over there. And so we did that for Shell and got a lot of great recognition. But when you think about, so we were able to solve a big challenge for our customer, and then it came full circle where we were able to take, there were about 50 generators that, you know, were left over from the project. So we were able to do a donation through the Danos Foundation, do some charitable organization. So there was really an assembly line here or a drive-up line. You go buy your chicken, you drive up and you pick up your generator. So I thought that's just a great example of how all of these great people have been able to do some things where we just embody all those foundational principles that we have as an organization. Another really good thing is the safety focus forums. And this is when you talk about aligning stakeholders, the way that these forums have changed and evolved over time. You know, if I'm looking back and reflecting to before that 10-year period, we would be at the Cutoff Youth Center, and it was more like a check the box, you know, where it's like people, I don't think it was a fun day for people. It was more like a compliance thing, a regulatory thing. And over time, this has really transitioned and evolved to more of a conference where we have vendors who are set up, we have customers who are participating. So again, when you think about leading with your foundational principles, it changes how you look at things, and it changes how you approach your business. And it's just authentic to who we are as an organization. One of the good outcomes of what happened at these safety focus forums is that we were able to take a group of field leaders and challenge them and say, what are the things to which you want to hold yourselves accountable and your people accountable in order to keep a safe working environment? So this was created by the field leaders to be used in the field, right? So if we would have thought that a group of staff employees should create this, we thought differently of that. So one of the good outcomes of this is that the field employees, the leaders created this for themselves. And then what I'll say is the partners, alluded to that a little bit previously about how important all of these people are when you think about aligning stakeholders. We've had Stacey in our office when we've talked to the field leaders, and they're part of that connection point for us, right? So everybody's our friend in this journey, so we need to embrace that. The vendors, customers, schools, so we work pretty closely with Fletcher, the technical college. We've had interns from the school, so there are some really great partnerships that are going on in that space as well. So I'll bring you to the end. I'll start to wrap it up. And, you know, the recap, we talked about how being intentional about company culture can truly transform a business. We also talked about how leading with foundational principles will inspire innovative ways of working, and also how aligning stakeholders can improve outcomes and results. What is going to, as we wrap it up, I have 2 more talking slides for me. And this, I'm doing it online. All right, self-reflection. So for me, this means that something that I try to practice is when something is not going well, I'll look in the mirror first. I try not to look at them and say, what am I doing or not doing that's getting in the way of it? And what am I saying or not saying? And then when I'm participating on a team, I try to challenge us as a team and to do the same thing. While the tendency might be to look outward, try to look inward at what that means. Honestly, self-reflection has meant for some people that the Danos culture is not right for them. That needs to be okay. Because what we're doing at Danos is not universally right for everyone. It's right for Danos. It's not right or wrong, but it serves us well in a way that helps us to really live our purpose. We're committed to that and have a resolve to commit to the purpose, the vision, the values, and the high-performance culture. And that's not right for everyone. And the next part for me is you're the writer of your own story. So as I share this externally with people, you know, I'm telling them a lot of things about what we're taking notes. And what I tell them is that you have to write your own story because every company is unique and different. We have different stakeholders, we have different business models, customers, employees. And I learned this lesson early on, and I'm not too proud to tell you the lessons that I learned. So early on, I had the opportunity to meet with one of our board of directors and his D person, development person, leading all of their development. So I had the opportunity to sit with them, and it was like drinking out of a fire hose. And there was so many great ideas, so much great information that we shared. And I was so smart and had so much wisdom after listening to all of that, that in my wisdom, they described to me something that they used as, they called it pixie dust. And that was really transformative to me. So in all my wisdom, I was really smart, right? Having listened to them. I worked with them, we copied their pixie dust, and we applied it at Danos. And there were a few words to describe the result of that. Train wreck and disaster, right? So that was really telling for me, was that you can't copy someone else's pixie dust because it's different. You have a different environment. So while you can listen to other people's success stories, other companies' success stories, you can't copy their things. You figure out your own and how that works. And while we're being very honest and I feel like while we can certainly celebrate and reflect on the successes that we've had as a Danos organization in this cultural transformation, I feel like in many respects we're just beginning. Because if we're very honest, each of us know that there are areas and opportunities for improvement, right? We don't have this right all the way across the organization. And we ought to not act like we need to be honest with ourselves and really transparent about that we still have a lot of work to do. So we have about 250 staff employees, and it's difficult enough in our walls to help shape what that culture's like. But think about, we have 2,500 people that are working out away from their families, in a lot of cases, representing Danos with our customers. So we have to really work at, there's so much reward in being able to do that and extending it beyond these four walls. Sorry, this is just so important to me, and to be able to stand here and share with you the experiences that I've had. Every day is not great. It's a challenge, but the journey is just super rewarding. So look forward to working with you on that, and thank you so much.
Just real quick to wrap up, I want to Stacey. She did an amazing job telling the story that only she obviously tell the people. Great about that our purpose, our vision is. And this already told you she started as a what? And has grown up to the highest level in this organization. So she's a perfect example of what we talk about when we're trying to build culture, what our value system is. Live that. And that's our desire for everybody. And I'll just close with this. I'll embellish one story. Dad walked into our office and said, "Hey, it's your job to protect the values." That was right for that moment in time. Today, it's all of our jobs to protect our values. And I've used this quote from Isaac, and you probably heard me say it. He says, "We're all keepers and protectors of values of this organization." So it's not Stacey's job. It's not anybody's job in HR alone. That's collectively our job. So as we go on this journey together, we think about what kind of organization do you want to build that you're going to leave as a legacy for your time at Danos. You know, this is our story, and we're going to write it together. Let's all be part of that so that it's as deeply personal to you as it is to Stacey. Because look, we spend more time here probably than we spend with our family. This is our family. It's our work family. Let's make it something we're proud of. So thank you, Stacey. What an amazing story.
Okay. I think there was a way people could questions, but no questions. So unless you all have questions.